Well, hello out there, my fellow backyard stargazers, and welcome to this episode of At the Eyepiece Live. We are sharing views of our sun today in hydrogen alpha. Now, I am dealing with some thin clouds up there, so it is obscuring our view just a bit, but this is our sun right here, and it's got some nice prominences on the sun right now. Now let me describe kind of what we're doing here. We are using this telescope right here. This is a Coronado SolarMax 60 hydrogen alpha telescope. First and foremost, safety, safety, safety. This is a very specialized telescope. You can't go ahead and just plop a hydrogen alpha on any telescope. Basically, you have to have either a dedicated hydrogen alpha telescope or a special hydrogen alpha accessory. I'm thinking specifically the one from Daystar Instruments called the Quark. Now, I don't have enough power to run the Quark. I've got to work something out at the eyepiece where the scope is out there. Excuse me, because the solar power device that I usually use to power the Quark isn't working right now, or I can't get it working. So we are using my, it's pretty much my mainstay from time to time, is the Coronado SolarMax 60. And we are checking out some really good prominence activity. Now, the reason here we are using a special telescope is because we are using, or we are viewing a very, very specific wavelength of light. In fact, let me show you here. This is the hydrogen alpha spectrum and the hydrogen alpha emission spectrum. So you can see this black bar at the absorption spectrum as well as the red emission. It's in the very deep red. That has to do with the Balmer lines and the wavelength along the electromagnetic spectrum that we're viewing. Okay, it's 600, let's see if I can recall what it is, 656 nanometers thereabouts is the wavelength, and that's very much, as you can tell from the graphic there, in the red. Now, if we are using on our scope right now a monochrome camera, so we're not seeing the image in red. If we were using a color camera, we would be. However, let's go ahead and simulate what this would look like if you were to step up to the eyepiece of an actual hydrogen alpha telescope and look at the sun. So that is about what type of view that you would see. It would be very, very red. Depending upon the telescope, depending upon what's going on the day, that's going to be dependent upon what features that you might see. Now, I decided to hop on here real quick, not only to kind of test my daytime stuff here at the eyepiece, but to also go ahead and, of course, show you the sun, because right now we're at a solar minimum, and there's not a whole lot of things going on in the sun usually right now. But today, specifically, we do have some nice prominences. So let's go ahead and turn the false color off so we get back to our camera view, which does help us a little bit here with the contrast, I think. And let's describe a little bit further. So let's show you the scope that I am using today. This is the Coronado SolarMax 60. Now, again, you don't want to point just any old telescope at the sun. Don't point anything, such as even your eyes. Don't use binoculars, nothing like that, unless you are using a very special telescope or a very special filter for what we call white light and solar observing in the white light, which is the photosphere. That's a completely different deal. Today we are using the Coronado SolarMax 60 specialized hydrogen alpha telescope. And let's go ahead and see what we can see here. Well, I guess I should start out with is what's prominences. Well, prominences are basically plasma, superheated gas. That's pretty much what makes up the sun, right? And in the sun is also all of these magnetic field lines just going crazy. The differential rotation mixes all these magnetic field lines up, and that's what creates some of these prominences where it's lifting, the magnetic field lines are lifting this material up, and that's what makes it visible. Now it's a prominence when it's on the limb, as today's objects are. While it's on the surface of the sun, we as backyard stargazers describe them as filaments. And I might be able to drop the exposure down to kind of illustrate a little bit of the surface detail. So you're picking up a little bit of the surface detail there of the sun on the chromosphere, which, by the way, is the layer that we're visible in here with the hydrogen alpha telescope. And you would basically see filaments as well, they're kind of elongated features usually. They have a darker contrast as what you would normally see on the surface here. And as they rotate towards the edge, that's how we're seeing them as prominences. So let's go back to increasing our exposure up here so that we have the best possible view. Now, one of the cool things too about solar observing in particular is you don't need a lot of aperture. This is only a 60mm telescope, and it affords a pretty decent view when the seeing conditions permit, as you can see. So we showed here the type of telescope that we're using. We talked briefly about the bandwidth that we are seeing here. 656 nanometers within the electromagnetic spectrum is what we're able to pick up with this very specialized telescope. Now, the good thing too is, well, I'll go into that another time when I'm able to broadcast with that particular instrument, which is the Daystar Quark Hydrogen Alpha Eyepiece. And we'll talk more about that one day when I can get that charger working, and we can use that, and we'll go ahead and show you what that instrument can do. But today we'll stick here with the solar filter. We do have, wow, quite a bit of high clouds up there, thin, that are no doubt probably obscuring some of our view here, but we do have some nice prominences visible. Let's turn off a couple of these other graphics here. And this way we can show you, let's bring up the different prominence types, because this is interesting as well. There are different classifications of prominences. This is particularly one classification. As you can see, this is from a reference book, Astrophysics of the Sun here. And what's always cool is I always like to bring this up while I'm observing the sun, because I like to, try to determine the types of prominences and the classifications that we are viewing here. So let's get our sun a little bit better into the field of view here. Really nice little, looks like a loop prom there, or arch prom. Definitely visible there. Probably a hedgerow prom there. Smaller ones too. I wish we were picking up just a little bit more contrast, but hey, I think that's pretty good. We've been pretty thin for solar activity such as prominences for the last week, at least that I know of. I've been checking some of the GONG Hydrogen Alpha, NASA Hydrogen Alpha network periodically and seeing what's going on. So we haven't really had a whole lot of prominence activity for the last few days until bam, today we get some good stuff here. So this is just on one side. Let's actually scoot over. Let's move the telescope here, and oh, there's a couple more at the very, very top here, as you can see. Very top, 12 o'clock position here. They're dimmer, but they are there. You can hopefully see those. And then there's actually a nice one too. Look at that one. That's pretty big. All of these are probably much bigger, by the way, than the Earth. I wish I had a way to show you scale. I will, actually, you know what? I will work on that. I will go ahead and work on getting a graphic that will show us the scale of these objects, these features of the sun, I should say, and show it in comparison to Earth, because it's pretty mind-blowing to consider the size of the sun compared to Earth, and then of course the size of these prominences to Earth. It's pretty incredible once you can get that visualized like that. So it's one of the things that I would like to do. Now, it's I'm broadcasting from Middle Tennessee here, so that little noise that you might hear, and I do apologize, but man, I've got to have the AC running out here. It's actually kind of a mild day. It's not really too bad. It's probably 88, maybe a little higher than that now. But the humidity isn't too bad here, so been an enjoyable afternoon and morning so far. So I wanted to get on here and do a brief broadcast of our sun in hydrogen alpha. Let's go ahead and get this centered up a little bit, and you know, look on the left there for the graphic, the solar prominence classifications for yourself, and see what you can determine there, what classifications we're viewing. And once again, too, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to what you would see if you had stepped up to an eyepiece of a hydrogen alpha telescope. You would no doubt on the sun, it comes through pretty well with your eye visually. With this particular camera, I don't know if it's a matter of dynamic range or just the amount of exposures needed to pick up the dimmer prominences as compared to the surface detail. It's a little bit more difficult. But there are no filaments on the sun today. These are the active regions that we're picking up on the limbs. And there's also no sunspots on the sun today. Again, that ties into being we are pretty much at a solar minimum and not a whole lot of solar activity like that going on right now. In fact, let me go ahead over. One of the great sites that I love to check out from time to time is solarham.net. I always like to go there just to see if there's any active regions on the sun and what might be coming up. In fact, let me show you. Let me show you that as well. This way you can get an idea of what I'm looking at. Always like to try to share as much information as possible. So there's the Solar Ham website that we have up, and it basically goes ahead and shows you the photosphere of the sun. This is a different layer. This is the visible wavelengths that we're seeing here, basically at the photosphere. One of the cool things about hydrogen alpha is we're actually seeing the next layer below the photosphere, which is the chromosphere. That's the really cool thing about that. But as you can see, we got pretty much a clear sun with no real active regions whatsoever. Now it's interesting, if we compare that to 2015 when we were, coming into this solar minimum, you can see we had some sunspots back then. And that's basically how they would appear. Now they would appear this way if you were looking at the sun with a photosphere or a white light filter. But you can also see these features in the chromosphere as well. They just look a little bit different. Much more interesting in my opinion. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say that. Sometimes the sunspots just in a white light solar filter are just very, very detailed with the umbra and penumbra that they have. And you can pick that up sometimes too in hydrogen alpha, but you got a lot of things going on in hydrogen alpha too. So it's just another wavelength of light to explore our closest star, the sun, and it's really cool to do so. So let's go ahead and go back to, this is our current view. Not much going on there. So let's go back to our view here of the sun in hydrogen alpha with our solar prominence classification up there from the book Astrophysics of the Sun by H. Zierens. All right, let me turn off my false color here. I basically have false color to demonstrate what you would see on the sun if you were viewing it with a hydrogen alpha telescope. Again, it's way into the far red wavelength of light that we're viewing this, and we do need a very specialized instrument. That is a pretty neat grouping of solar prominences right there. Let me see what we can do to pizzazz that up a bit. Knock it down just a bit. Actually got more and more high clouds coming in, thinner clouds. It's going to obscure a little bit, kill a little bit of our contrast. But hey, we are still checking the sun out. Isn't that amazing? That's the coolest thing with astronomy is you can go ahead and do it day or night with a certain, of course, looking at the sun, safety first. With certain equipment, you can go ahead and enjoy astronomy day and night. Go ahead and let this view continue here. I'm going to go ahead and lower the mic so you don't constantly hear the hum of the AC unit going off here. Enjoy. you can almost see the clouds there moving through the frame. Yeah, they're starting to move through there. You can definitely pick that up. Hopefully it's coming through on the YouTube channel okay. Once again, we are looking through some very thin clouds up there. They're not obscuring it too much, but they are no doubt probably taking out some of the detail there. Certainly as it pertains to a bit of the contrast. But continue to enjoy the view here. And please don't forget, hit the subscribe button. This way you can go ahead and know when we have other events that we do. We'd like to do events that are live for nighttime observing, weather permitting, and personal schedule, of course, permit. And just like we're doing now, our very first, I think it's our very first live solar broadcast here on YouTube as well. Plus, we do a few other things on the channel from time to time. Equipment reviews, we talk about observing, etc. We'd love to have your subscription. So thanks for watching and continue to enjoy the view here. so let's go ahead. I think what we'll do here, we are going to keep this pretty much short and sweet, I believe. We have covered up. There we go. All right, so hi everybody, John back here, and I think this will be a quick wrap here for this episode. We basically wanted to go ahead and test our, our setup and software, etc., for how we would do some of the daytime broadcasts. I can see that there are significantly more clouds probably approaching for me. They are calling for rain here later tonight, or at least tomorrow. So I wanted to go ahead and hop on though. I sure hope you enjoyed it. We got some nice prominences on the sun. It's been very few and far between as far as any type of really nice solar activity goes. And I'm glad that we were able to break out the Solar Max 2 here, Hydrogen Alpha Telescope, and get that working here and show you some nice features on the sun. Let's go ahead one more time. Let's check out that other side here as we scoot on over. And yeah, the other clouds are really kicking out the contrast because that other prom and over here on this side is just kind of barely visible now. But hey, how cool is this to be able to see our closest star, the sun, in Hydrogen Alpha. Here it is. That is what we are seeing here, right there at the 656 nanometer wavelength. And let's see here, one more thing. What we'll do here is, if you were at the eyepiece of a real, well, I should say real, if you were at the eyepiece of a Hydrogen Alpha telescope and you were to step up, this would be what you would basically be seeing. Probably a decent amount of detail on the surface too. Let me see if I can crank that down maybe a little bit more for you. And again, the sun right now is at a solar minimum, so there's not a whole lot of disk detail such as sunspots going on, or even these filaments, which are basically prominences, but we're viewing them on the disk, not on the edge. And again, prominences are essentially the superheated plasma gas of the sun being lifted off in these magnetic field lines, and that's what permits us to see it as we are here in this field. Let me take off the false color again. We still got, you're picking up a little bit of the surface detail now too. Here, as I cranked the brightness down or the gain down just a little bit. And let me do that too on our feed real quick. I'm applying a little bit extra gain to, there we go. So that might be coming through a little bit better now on, you crank the gamma down, there you go. You can see the actual chromosphere a little bit better now of the sun right there. All right, well, hey, I think we did mission accomplished here. We broadcast the sun in Hydrogen Alpha. I sure hope that you appreciated the views. And don't forget, please hit that little bell there to go ahead and subscribe to the At the Eyepiece channel. We hope to be doing as much as we can here to promote astronomy, and in particular this type of astronomy where amateur astronomers such as myself go ahead and share the view with you online here. So until we see some clear skies again, hope to see you next time right here at the Eyepiece.